Not been this intrigued about a Super Bowl matchup for a long, long time.
This young Seattle Seahawks defense, how tenacious they are, how to get in your face. The key is getting to Peyton Manning. Obviously, everything goes out the window. Percy Harvin comes out and he hurts you in special teams. He figures you out. He figures you out.
Seahawks, Super Bowl 48 champions.
Good Monday morning, everyone. Welcome to First Take. I'm Carrie Champion. Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith are in a snowy New York City. Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
What's going on?
Carrie Champion, as you just mentioned, we are here in New York where it is actually snowing cats and dogs right now. Do you realize how lucky Roger Goodell and the NFL were to have the almost summer weather they had last night for the Super Bowl?
That is a fact. I was just thinking he missed it by 24 hours. We'll talk about that throughout the entire show. Also throughout the show, this will be dedicated to the 43-8 dominating win for the Seahawks in Super Bowl 48. We discuss the quarterbacks, the teams, the coaches, and what's next for the Seahawks and the Broncos. But up first, it's their very first Super Bowl title in team history. Seahawks dominated the game from opening play. A safety on the first play from scrimmage was the fastest score in Super Bowl history. Peyton Manning and the #1 offense could not get into a rhythm and struggled all night.
They did it, with their defense. They did it with their special teams, and they did it with their offense. So they played very well. They outplayed us really in all three phases. No question, they're an outstanding football team, and we didn't play well enough to play with them. I don't think it's nerves. I mean, we've played in a few of these this season, so. Just about really, give them credit. They had a lot to do with it, and, in some cases, and in other cases, some of it was self-inflicted.
Broncos head coach says it was not nerves, in fact, self-inflicted. Skip, what is your take? What happened to the Broncos?
Stephen A. Smith, allow me to say, first of all, I was dead wrong about this game. I had Denver, the favorite, winning a close, low-scoring game. 43-8? Are you kidding me? So my big picture takeaway is that on a night that was made outdoors in New Jersey in February for Peyton Manning, almost 50 degrees at kickoff, and with today's rules obviously favoring the offense to score nothing but point after point after point, that Seattle defense shocked me by making a case, making a statement, and we will debate this a little later in the show, that it should be the unit considered for all-time greatness, because it didn't just dominate Peyton Manning and company. I thought it basically bullied Peyton Manning and company. But Stephen A., allow me also to say that I did not think that Peyton and company ever psychologically recovered from the first snap of the football game, which was an unforced error, a premature snap, as you well know, that went right over Peyton's head as he was attempting to change the first play at the line of scrimmage. That wasn't just Manny being Manny, as in Manny Ramirez doing this all the time. He never does that. And from that point on, I thought Peyton Manning, who put up obviously the greatest regular season numbers we have ever seen from a quarterback, looked skittish and shell-shocked. Even the hint of pressure that he got forced that ugly duckling of an overthrow that went right to obviously Cam Chancellor. And then on the second interception, Averill just blew up Orlando Franklin, hit Peyton's arm, pick six going the other way. And to me, Seattle made sure that Peyton Manning starred in Duck Dynasty last night on the Super Bowl stage. This game was over by halftime. Stage is yours.
Well, first of all, let me say this, Skip Bayless. Obviously, I was dead wrong because I thought that somehow, some way, Peyton Manning would be able to figure them out. That simply wasn't the case. But, we can engage in hyperbole. We can be insulting or whatever the case may be. It's just important to be factual. I'm dead serious with this. The Denver Broncos got punked yesterday. in a Super Bowl on the world's biggest stage in sports. They got punked. They got embarrassed. They got stomped on. They got beat down in every phase of the game. They got outplayed. They got outmuscled. They got bullied. They got pushed around. They got outcoached, where John Fox and Jack Del Rio, the so-called defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos, he should be ashamed of himself, too. They had this team ill-prepared to play. The opening snap, with Manny Ramirez, considering that name, but Manny Ramirez along with Peyton Manning, he couldn't hear. Even the Denver Broncos fans got outperformed because before a point was scored, before or immediately following kickoff, it was clear that this was a pro-Seattle crowd. No, it wasn't the same noise that you hear in Seattle, but it was noisy nevertheless. And it was so noisy, in fact, that it was incredibly alarming because Troy Aikman astutely pointed out while commentating for the game that this is not your typical Super Bowl crowd where it feels neutral or anything like that. I mean, when you heard, think about this. They're at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, about 3,000 miles from Seattle, Washington. And Peyton Manning Center could not hear his quarterback calling the play, making the call, because the crowd noise was that raucous. This is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it in Super Bowl history. But that's what happened. And so for me, when I look at that, think about these sequences, Skip, and I'm talking about this is almost instantly. This is in the first minute of the game. You have Trenton Holiday comes out. He gets smashed at the 14-yard line, opening kickoff. Peyton Manning, very first snap, all of a sudden snaps over his head. You've got a safety. And then after that, they get the ball again, and you've got Thomas coming over on a slant pattern, and who is he greeted by? None other than Cam Chancellor, who puts a hit on him, and all of a sudden you watch everybody on Denver's offense. They're all soft. They all softened up from that moment. They were coming across the middle, looking every which way. They were scared to get popped. They had other stuff on their mind. That's why I used the word punk. Yes, Peyton Manning may have been offended by the word embarrassed. It was an embarrassing performance. It was putrid. It was pathetic on the part of the offense. But Seattle's defense is just lethal, man. They are on another level. I cannot believe I was this wrong about how lethal and awesome they are. But I'm going to emphasize it again. The Denver Broncos did not just lose yesterday. They got punked, straight up punked, diminished, minimized. I mean, they had their hearts snatched out of their chest within the first 3 minutes of the game, and Seattle never looked back because Denver never looked forward. They were in survival mode, and obviously we saw how that worked out for them.
I'm glad you brought up the fans. I meant to. I did tweet immediately about it because, to me, East Rutherford sounded like East Seattle, New Jersey. And I'm going to assume, Stephen A., that with ticket prices plummeting because so many people feared how bad the weather was going to be, that a whole lot of 12th men, so to speak, a lot of Seattle fans who had come east, snapped up those tickets. And I don't think Peyton and company were ready for the wall of noise that hit them, as you say, maybe not like it would in Seattle. But I've been to a whole lot of Super Bowls, dating back to Super Bowl 10, I believe it was. And I have never heard a pro crowd on a neutral field be that loud early in the game the way Seattle's was. So the 12th man did travel. And I think it also helped inspire a Seattle offense, Stephen A., because Russell Wilson, as usual, didn't put up a lot of flashy stats, just 206 yards passing, but he made key throw, as usual, after key throw, the 2 touchdown passes. And the stat of the night for me, offensively for Seattle, that's the first time in Super Bowl history that an offense gave up no turnovers and no sacks. 0 turnovers, 0 sacks for the Seattle Seahawks. Well, when you're forcing 4 turnovers on the other side, I think it's going to be a rout. and it was. And as I also tweeted early in the second half, after Percy Harvin ran the second half kickoff back to make it, 29-0?
29.
They should have let Bruno Mars come back out. Bruno Mars should have come back out and played the rest of the second half because he was way better at halftime than the game we were forced to watch the rest of the way.
No question about it. And I'll tell you something else, Skip Bayless. Listen, when I look at these guys, it is unforgivable how John Fox, you got to remember, John Fox's signature is defense, even though he's a head coach in this league. All right? Now he's the coach. He's lost a Super Bowl with two different teams. But this man is about defense. Jack Del Rio is supposed to be about defense. And you know what Seattle's defense is going to bring to your offense. How can you be so thoroughly ill-prepared in a game of this magnitude? We got to remember, they didn't have a potent running game, a potent running attack yesterday. They pretty much neutralized Marshawn Lynch to some degree. But Percy Harvin looked like he had jets, like a jet backpack or something. They couldn't stay with this man. You look at Curse, you look at Golden Tate and these boys. They seemed as if they could do what they wanted. And in the meantime, the Denver Broncos, you don't even record a first down until about 3 or 4 minutes into the second quarter.
Yeah.
Not even a first down.
Yeah.
This is just, they got beat down on an epic level. There is no category in which the Denver Broncos beat Seattle yesterday. Special teams, offense, defense, protecting the pass as opposed to, listen, they didn't even blitz. They had pressure on Peyton Manning all day. They didn't even blitz. They didn't have to. Avril and these boys, they couldn't do it. Clemens and Avril couldn't do anything with them. It's just embarrassing. Peyton Manning went from not being touched to being touched all night long. It was bad, man. It was one of those performances reminiscent of Denver losing to San Francisco 55-10. It was one of those embarrassing performances that has me looking at Peyton Manning a little bit differently, as we'll talk about later. And the Denver Broncos, I'm not going to lie to you, I find it hard to believe how they're going to be able to walk the streets in the offseason. They made themselves look like frauds in one game. Total frauds.
Well, to finish your point on the Fox Del Rio defense, I thought the Broncos defense quit in the second half. Have you ever seen so many missed tackles? The game became a joke to watch because Denver didn't want to tackle anybody after Percy Harvin's kickoff return for the opening second half touchdown. Meanwhile, on the other side, Stephen A., I was intrigued that Richard Sherman said after the game that they decided to mostly zone up. They played a lot of zone against Peyton Manning and basically said, here, you can have all your little underneath dink and dunk stuff, but when you do complete it, as you pointed out earlier on, we are going to blast your receivers. We're going to blast Demarius. We're going to blast Wes Welker. I'm not even sure Eric Decker played last night. Maybe I missed it, but I'm not even sure he was on the football field. So that's how they shut down a guy who just put up the greatest regular season ever numbers.
We do know that Eric Decker played because he did a pregame interview, and there's a quote from him after the game. Now, during the game, we didn't see him, but we know he was there because he gave interviews before and after. That's all we know about him. Right. As it pertains to the rest of the guys. Listen, Demaryius Thomas and Julius Thomas both. I can't even emphasize. I know Demaryius got 13 receptions, but the bottom line is he was a non-factor. They couldn't do anything after the catch. These two guys were so incredibly disappointing, but more credit goes to Seattle than blame to Denver, because now, think about this. Seattle did it against, Jimmy Graham, okay? You got the NFC Championship game against Davis. So you got Graham, Davis, and then Thomas. Complete no-shows from the tight end spot in the postseason against the Seattle Seahawks. You just can't say enough. This defense is elite. As good as we knew they were, we did not give them their just due. They embarrassed Peyton Manning. They didn't beat him. They embarrassed him.
Broncos have now lost the most Super Bowls in NFL history. That number would be 5. Meanwhile, one could argue that Seattle's defense should have won MVP as a whole, but it was linebacker Malcolm Smith, the 3rd player at his position in NFL history to win MVP honors. The 7th-round draft pick, the guy who was not even supposed to be a starter this season, said he was just fortunate.
Guess we had good coverage on the back end. Peyton kind of scanned the opposite side of the field and was working his way back. We had excellent pressure. Somebody got their arm on the ball. I didn't even see who. Cliff. And I guess the ball came out high, and I was just fortunate enough. The running back was kind of sitting there waiting on it, and I kind of just attacked it and took off.
Smith also added he played running back in high school. Meanwhile, Smith's pick 6 made it 22-0. So, Stephen A., I'll ask you this. Was he the right choice for MVP?
No, he was not, but that's not to take anything away from him. Didn't have any interceptions for the first, 43 games of his career. 4 of his last 5 games, he's had an interception. He was in the right place at the right time after Avril got his arm on Peyton Manning's right elbow, and it is what it is. The running back didn't even seem to want the ball that much. I mean, the ball just laid up in the air. He, stood there frozen, for crying out loud. Didn't make much sense. But Malcolm Smith deserves a lot of credit. But I'm going to tell you, no, he doesn't deserve the MVP. To me, it can go to either Percy Harvin, Skip, who was absolutely electrifying, or I'm not going to lie to you, I wouldn't have a problem at all if the MVP vote had gone to the entire Seattle Seahawks defense. They were that awesome. I mean, you look at Clemens and Avril. They dominated Denver's offensive line. They just they had pressure on Peyton Manning all game long. They just completely dominated. You look at Cam Chancellor. We don't even need to talk about what he did. He set the tone with his hits, plus he had an interception, plus he helped force another. Then you look at Bobby Wagner, who deserves a lot of credit because he was all over the place, along with K.J. Wright and Malcolm Smith. And, oh, by the way, you still had Richard Sherman and Maxwell locking down the outside wide receivers for Denver. Everywhere you turned on Seattle's defense, they completely dominated. They didn't win, but struggled. They dominated. They reduced an offense that had put up over 600 points, number 1 passing offense, number 1 in total yards and points. They reduced them to rubble. They were nothing. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about. As you look at the Denver Broncos, you're literally looking at them, and you actually found yourself having lost the respect for them. Because you just said to yourself, you know something? This is not about, they just had a bad game. You got punked. You got your heart snatched out of your chest. You were reduced to a tin man. No heart whatsoever. And they were scared to go over the middle. They were scared to catch passes. I mean, and Peyton Manning, he was tap dancing, all right? Yes, better than the late Gregory Hines, God rest his soul. I mean, everywhere you turn, there was just nothing. They were reduced to nothing, man. And it's all because of this Seattle defense. But if you want to give it to an individual, I'd say Percy Harvin. But I personally believe the Seattle Seahawks defense set the tone because everything was irrelevant from the time they went up 15-0.
Okay, I hear how you go back and forth. Could it be this? Could it be that? This was a really, really difficult, quick MVP vote. And Stephen A., I have been involved in many of these MVP votes back in my newspaper past. You're in the press box. You're trying to get down to the field so you can get down to the interviews in the last 2 minutes of the game. It's frantic. It's crazy. Your thoughts are all over the place. And some of these votes can come out screwy because you just jot down the first name that pops to the top of your mind. And obviously, Malcolm Smith, as you point out, did have a pick-6 return. Unfortunately, it's a duck that lands right in his lap, and then he's basically unchallenged all the way, 69 yards to the end zone. So I can't read a lot into that. I did think it was cool that a no-name player who played for Pete Carroll at USC, an LA kid, did win MVP of the Super Bowl. But if I had to vote for somebody, I agree with you. The whole defense deserved it, as I tweeted late last night. But if I had to vote for one man on defense, I would vote for Cam Chancellor. I thought he set the tone in this football game, even with that early blasting of Demaryius you pointed out. It's just a 2-yard gain. This was 6'3", 230 pounds Cam against 6'3", 230 pounds of Demarius. And Cam knocked Demarius back, 5 yards on his keister. And again, he didn't hurt him, but he sent a message that had Earl Thomas jumping into his arms for joy, because the message had been delivered: you can't come over our middle. Then later, Cam blew up Wes Welker on a route, and obviously he had the one interception. Again, a fairly easy, ugly duckling of an interception thrown by Peyton. Both he and Malcolm had 10 total tackles, 6 unassisted. Malcolm also had a fumble recovery. Maybe that gives him a slight statistical edge. Cam set the tone in this game. And honorable mention, Stephen A., has to be Russell Wilson. I wouldn't have been offended if Russell had won MVP, because he made so many key throws, key third down throws, that iced this game for Seattle.
Listen, I'm not taking anything from Russell Wilson. He played a good game. He really, really did. He was impressive, as was the entire Seahawks offense as far as I'm concerned. But they were an afterthought. When you think about the Super Bowl, you're not really thinking about the offense. If you're thinking about anybody, you're thinking about Percy Harvin, because his speed, he was clearly the fastest dude on the field. Outside of that, everything is about their defense. I'm going to repeat this. The number one offense in points, in passing yards, did not register a first down until a few minutes into the second quarter. On top of it all, the Seahawks had a safety, 2 field goals, a rush TD, a pass TD, and a kickoff return for a touchdown before the number one offense in the game, led by the league MVP for the 5th time, who's a first ballot Hall of Famer, who entered the game involved in debates as to where he would go down as it pertained to being the greatest quarterback this game has ever known. He was held scoreless before Seattle, until Seattle had 29 points. I mean, this is complete domination. It was an annihilation of the ages. They were beat down, and it was because of this defense. It is that simple to me. Nobody on the offense was really relevant outside of Percy Harvin. Nobody was really relevant because the defense basically to me, the suspense was, are you going to let them score? Literally. That's how it was. Is Denver going to score a point? Are we going to see a Super Bowl in which Peyton Manning is held? I mean, Skip, as bad as this is, 43-8, and the blowout that it is, I ask you a question, Skip, and I'll give you the floor. Could you imagine if we're sitting here today and Peyton Manning hadn't scored a point? 43-0. Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
It had potential.
Remember, it had potential because I thought Seattle sort of started to sit back in the second half. What did Peyton have in the second half? 176 yards passing to get to 280 for the game. So he got a little rhythm going later because the score was completely out of hand. But, Carrie, one last quick point on the MVP.
Sure.
Just remember, this was the classic game that deserved a co-MVP, and there was precedence for this. And I'm going back for Cowboy fans, back to Super Bowl 10, when the Cowboys that was Cowboys' doomsday defense, destroyed the Broncos 27-10, and Harvey Martin and Randy White were co-MVPs. So you could have done that last night defensively. You could have given Cam and Malcolm, or you could have mixed it up and gone Malcolm and Russell, or Malcolm and Percy Harvin. You could have done it, and I think last night's game deserved a co-MVP. But I guess you'd have to come up with 2 cars then. Maybe they didn't want to do that.
It's not embarrassing at all. I would never use that word. There's a lot of professional football players in that room, the locker room, that put a lot of hard work and effort into being here, into playing in that game. And the word embarrassing is an insulting word, to tell you the truth.
Wow, the now 5-time MVP took issue with that word, as you heard. Before the game, most commentary said the season was a win for Peyton Manning just by making it to the Super Bowl. However, the dominating way Manning and the Broncos lost to Seattle was arguably unexpected. And Stephen A., you touched on this, and I asked you this first. After last night's loss, did his legacy take a hit?
I'm sorry, Kerry, did you ask me?
No, it's me, Skip. Listen.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Peyton Manning, the answer would be yes. But what I would ask us to do is understand that, or ask Peyton Manning to understand that no one's questioning his greatness. Nobody's questioning, from an historical perspective, what he means in NFL lore. He will go down as one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. He will go down as a champion. He will go down, he'll be up there. He'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. We all know this. But what has come to an end are questions involving, would he be better than Montana?
Okay.
And Brady and those guys. That's a wrap. That's over. Because it's not that he just lost. It's how he looked while losing.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is, Colin Kaepernick looked better against the Seattle Seahawks than Peyton Manning did. That's just a fact. Drew Brees in getting outscored 34-7 on a Monday Night Football game or losing to Seattle in the postseason, he looked better than Peyton Manning did. Aaron Rodgers would have looked better because he's more athletic. He's not a stationary target. And some of those throws wouldn't have fluttered, wouldn't have been duck throws. You can't escape this reality. And look, I watched last night our post-game coverage, Skip. I was very, very proud of Chris Carter. Trent Dilfer does an outstanding job as always and made his point. And then Chris Carter came back and was like, we didn't make any excuses for anybody else. I wanted a ring. I never got one. We didn't bring up Dan Marino and no running game and no defense. We didn't make any excuses for him. We didn't make any excuses for Brett Favre. We're not going to make any excuses for Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning got rocked, man. He got whipped. He got embarrassed. He got beat down. Now, his offensive line didn't help him. Those receivers that turned into straight-up punks, scared to death, petrified like deers in headlights off of the hits that they were taking. They were straight-up petrified. I know it's petrified, but I said petro for emphasis. I know the word. I'm telling you, it was that bad. And so for me, when I look at Peyton Manning, you had 2 weeks to prepare. You are making the calls. You, on the opening play, that kind of mistake happens when you had 2 weeks to practice. You are down, and you throw the interception, and you go down 22-0. John Fox and these boys go for it on a 4th and 2. You can't get a first down. And then it got to the point where a mere concession speech was given because you're down and you're on Seattle's 39-yard line. And it's a 4th and 11. And the man chose to punt. I mean, listen, everywhere you turn, Peyton Manning, just shrunk. It just, listen, it was bad, man. I'm trying. I really am trying because he's so classy. And he deserves our respect, and he has it. But the conversation about him being above those guys are over. Because I got to tell you this, Skip, in fairness to you, Skip Bayless, I don't care how he got outperformed in the AFC Championship game. I don't care what weapons he's devoid of. I find it very, very hard to believe that Tom Brady would have looked like that yesterday in a Super Bowl encounter. I just find that hard to believe. I certainly don't believe Aaron Rodgers would have done that. I don't believe it. Peyton Manning was a stationary target, man, and his limitations and whatever deficiencies exist got thoroughly and flagrantly exposed. It was bad, man. It was real bad.
It was bad. I echo what you say about Chris Carter last night on prime time. I was also, I guess, proud of him is the right word. I just applaud him because he delivered the cold, hard facts about Peyton's legacy. Stephen A. Smith, it took a huge hit last night for all the reasons you just detailed. You've said over and over and over it was just bad. Skittish, shell-shocked, overmatched. And I said last week going into this game that the impact was going to be 2 to 3 times the normal Super Bowl on legacies because the degree of difficulty was so high on both sides. Number 1 ranked defense, number 1 ranked offense. Maybe all-time great offense over here, potentially all-time great defense over here. I wrote last week for ESPN.com, Peyton Manning, if he could beat this defense and beat it thoroughly, he could win the equivalent of 2 or 3 Super Bowls in one night. Now it feels like he lost the equivalent of 2 or 3 Super Bowls in one night. His postseason record, as you know, falls to 11-12. In Super Bowls, he is now 1-2. And remember, his QBR last night, Stephen A., you know my favorite stat, 0 to 100. Peyton's QBR was 24.4. And that was the worst we've seen in a Super Bowl since Rex Grossman's 7.1 against Peyton Manning's Indianapolis Colts, the only Super Bowl Peyton has won, where I said the degree of difficulty was pretty low in that game, maybe a 4 on a scale of 10, because the Colts should have beaten the Chicago Bears. I think they had the 5th-ranked defense that year, and they had a virtual backup at quarterback in Rex Grossman. So now you have to step away and you say, well, gee, Peyton had a chance to pole vault up the all-time rankings, and instead he fell on his face. So I stand by what I said. I don't want to rub it in this morning, Stephen A., but I didn't have Peyton in my top 5 quarterbacks. I did not have him above Brett Favre at the 5th spot, and I definitely don't have him above there now. And as you point out, let's just stop it with any talk about better than Brady, better than Montana, heck, better than John Elway. We can go on and on. Now he falls way back in the pack because clearly he is the greatest regular season quarterback ever. Nobody questions that. But too routinely, he has failed to live up to his regular season greatness in the seeds he has won in the regular season for his football teams in Indy and Denver with 13-3 after 13-3 kind of records and number 1 seeds. He just hasn't cashed in enough in the postseason to make an all-time great case. Last night was a huge hit on Peyton's legacy. Would you not agree with that?
I think it was a hit because of what we tried to make of him entering the game. You know, people were trying to gloss over the 11-11 postseason record entering the Super Bowl contest, and we knew that he was going up against an elite defense. We just suspected that it would be tough, it would be relatively low scoring. So when you consider the fact that they got beat in every phase of the game, special teams, defense, offense, coaching, okay, and just completely demoralized. I mean, it's hard to even hold. It's hard to hold anyone completely accountable because if you get your heart snatched out of your chest and you get reduced to midget status heart-wise and the team knows it, what are you supposed to do? So on that level, I get it because, you know, Thomas with Maxwell forcing a fumble. How do you not hold on to that football? How do you not understand the importance of holding on to the football, not turning the ball over? You know, you got guys welcoming these boys running across the middle. Skip, they were scared. They were looking. That one interception, yes, the first interception Manning threw, it was a bad throw. But I also didn't see Julius Thomas too anxious to catch the ball either because he heard Cam Chancellor and those boys coming, and he was wondering whether or not they were coming from him. I mean, these dudes were scared. I mean, literally scared. And it's just an embarrassing situation to be in, but it is what it is. In the end, what it comes down to is that Peyton Manning is a brilliant quarterback in terms of his mind, his IQ, and he's overcome a lot. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a champion. but he has limitations, and they got exposed. And if I'm any team going up against Denver in the future and Peyton Manning, all I need to do is put some Rough Riders out there on that football field and say, you know what, don't give away anything deep. Let them dip and dunk, all right, and just put a hat on them, and you can snatch their heart. That's the message that Denver sent. And they didn't send it to just the receivers. They sent it to Peyton Manning, too.
Peyton Manning now holds the record for the most playoff losses. Go ahead, Skip. You want to say something?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead. Just last quick point.
Yeah.
I was rooting for Peyton last night, and I'm being tough on him now, but I just want to say I'm hoping that what happened last night was so awful and so ugly that it will further motivate him to come back even stronger next year than he was this year.
What's the moment like to be standing out here knowing you're Super Bowl champions under the confetti and beat one of the great quarterbacks and the best offense in history?
It's unbelievable, man. I think the Legion of Boom and our defense wanted to etch ourselves in history, and I think we did that today.
Where are you? Steel curtain, no-name Miami defense, 85 Bears?
We're in there somewhere. As long as we're in that mix, we're all right. It doesn't matter what order you put us in. Just put us in the conversation.
All right, the number one offense faces the number one defense. At the end of the day, there was no real contest, and as Sherman just mentioned, just put them in the conversation. Bobby Wagner added they hadn't played a defense that flies around like we do, hits like we do on every single play. Broncos were just not prepared for their defense. So, Skip Bayless, here's the question for you. Where does Seattle's defense rank among the greats?
Does this ever become a great question on this day, Stephen A. Smith? We have two issues here. We have single-season greatness, and we have, obviously, all-time historical greatness. Let's do single-season first. I still don't think this Seattle defense this season was better than the 85 Bears were in their single season. Now, if we want to project on to all-time greatness, obviously, Buddy Ryan, who was the architect and driving force of the Bears defense, left after that game to be the head coach, as you well know, of the Philadelphia Eagles. That defense basically just lasted one season and then began to fall apart in the next three seasons. So we can't do historical greatness. This Seattle defense, off what I saw last night, being the fifth youngest defense or fifth youngest team ever to make it to a Super Bowl, has a real chance to become the all-time greatest defense. But I will give it the second greatest single-season defense to the Bears. And the only reason I make it second is I remind you, Stephen A., and I was there covering these games in ’85, the Bears, in their first home playoff game against Phil Simms and Bill Parcells' New York Giants, 21-0 shutout. The Giants had no chance. Second game, NFC Championship game against Eric Dickerson's Los Angeles Rams, albeit with Dieter Brock at quarterback, 24-0. And then, even though it was only the ninth best offense that year, Tony Eason's New England Patriots in the Super Bowl, New England wound up with 123 total yards and got beat down, got punked 46-10. A late touchdown pass from the backup quarterback, Steve Grogan, to give them their only touchdown. Last night, Peyton did have 306 total yards, albeit some of them garbage time, fourth quarter yards. But still, I think the Bears defense was just a little bit more intimidating than even the Seattle defense was for 1 year. All time, that remains to be seen. But I give this group, Legion of Boom, a real shot to go down as the all-time best, even beyond the steel curtain defense that you fell in love with as a kid with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I give him a shot as well, but you are right. Long term, I think about I love the steel curtain, me, Joe Green, L.C. Greenwood, Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Mel Blount, and those boys. I definitely love that. And considering the Super Bowls that they won, beat Roger Staubach in the Super Bowl, beat Fran Tarkenton in a Super Bowl, beat the Oakland Raiders to get to the Super Bowl with Kenny Stabler and those boys. I definitely, long term, I'm looking from an historical perspective. I got to look at the Steelers a little bit differently. But in terms for one season, I thought about Chicago, and I remember Steve Grogan. What stood out in my mind about the Chicago Bears in that '85 Super Bowl. That Super Bowl, the New England Patriots had 11 rushes for 7 yards. They rushed for 7 yards on 11 carries. I mean, just completely shut down. But again, New England wasn't that much of a juggernaut to me, so the 46-10 beatdown was something we sort of saw coming. When I look at the 2000 Ravens, like my brother Ray Lewis broke down to me the other day, their defense, how Marvin Lewis was the defensive coordinator, and Ray was talking to them. Listen, we're going to play them. We're going to give up any big plays or whatever. Make them beat you incrementally because Kerry Collins can't do it. You stop the run, they can't run on you. You're going to get in his face, and he can't take that beating all day long. He's going to succumb to that level of pressure. And that's exactly what they did in losing to the Giants 34-7. I mean, losing to the Ravens 34-7. But what I saw yesterday, here's where it stands out in my mind. Chicago did that against Tony Mason, Steve Grogan. Ravens did it against Kerry Collins. There was no Phil Simms or Jeff Hostetler. The Seattle Seahawks did this to Peyton Manning, who entered the game with 5 weapons, with the most prolific offense in the game, even from a historical perspective. And they damn near shut him out. I mean, if it wasn't for them zoning it up, softening things a little bit, stepping back, being in prevent mode, the Denver Broncos may not have scored a point. Peyton Manning, with Julius and Demaryius Thomas, with Eric Decker, with a Wes Welker, with a Noshawn Moreno, who was almost reduced to tears again yesterday, this time not because of the national anthem, just because of the national disgrace that his teammates were exhibiting. Bottom line is, the Seattle Seahawks defense did this to Peyton Manning. This may be, in my mind, the greatest defensive Super Bowl performance I have ever seen. I can't think of a Super Bowl performance on defense that was better than what I saw yesterday.
How about for a whole single regular season plus playoffs, just a one-season defense?
They're in the discussion, but I remember them losing to Arizona to close out the next to last game of the season, if I remember correctly. I thought San Francisco could have had them in that NFC Championship game. The defense was really good, but I thought there were some vulnerabilities there, and San Francisco could have won that game. So I didn't see that during the Bears when they won 21-0 against the Giants and then 28-0 in that NFC Championship game. I didn't see that. So it's a debate, but it's argumentative. I just think that for this one game in the Super Bowl, I've never seen a defensive performance like this.
Okay, I'm going to go for one single season. I'll go Bears, 85 Bears 1, this Seattle defense 2, and Ray Lewis's defense 2000 number 3. And I remind you, the Bears did it upside down from the way Seattle does it. The Bears could rush the passer in a way you have never seen anybody terrorize the passer and take away the run with the front 7. As you know, Richard Dent and Mike Singletary, and we could go on and on. But their back 4, their secondary, to me, was just a little better than average because it didn't have to be much better than average to be great. In this case, obviously, it's built from the back forward. With the back 4, I think a little better than the front 7 is, even though the front 7 played great last night. But again, as pass rushers, Seattle can't measure up to the 85 Bears, and I would give the Bears a slight edge there.
With the 4th youngest team in the NFL this season, the future looks extremely bright for Seattle. According to the Las Vegas Superbook, Seattle is a co-favorite to win the Pro Football Championship next season. So here's the question, and not so obvious, but obvious. Is Seattle building a dynasty, Stephen A?
Nope, I'm not going to go that far for a multitude of reasons. I think that if you said to me that they didn't have to worry about a salary cap and they can keep their talent in place for years and years to come, I would co-sign with that because they've got a billionaire owner in Paul Allen who certainly could afford to do that. But with the cap restraints being what they are, with these guys being gifted individually like they are, it's going to be very, very difficult to keep them together for years to come. Richard Sherman is going to want some money next season. I mean, he's getting paid less than $1 million right now, and he's the best cornerback in the game in the eyes of a lot of people. All right, Maxwell hasn't been too shabby. He's done a job. Cam Chancellor is establishing himself as a modern-day Jack Tatum, for crying out loud. You got Bobby Wagner all over the field. You've got Earl Thomas, who Trent Dilfer and these boys told me the other day is comparable to Ed Reed in his heyday and stuff like that. You've got Avril on your defensive line. You've got Clemens there as well. They're loaded. And so because they're loaded, I find it very difficult that you're going to be able to keep all of those people together, because they're not just great because they're a team. They're great because individually they're incredibly skilled. And I think other people are going to want them, and they'll move forward. Not to mention the fact that they beat the San Francisco 49ers by the skin of their teeth. I ran into Alden Smith, Skip, in New York just the other day at Jay-Z's 40-40 spot in New York. He's like, we'll be back. We'll be back. Don't worry about that. And I believe him. And so for me, as long as San Francisco is around and relevant, as long as their offense is still questionable to some degree, I'm not going to go as far as to say dynasty. What I will tell you is, if you told me that this defense could stay together for years to come, then I would say to you, I don't have a problem with anybody believing that. I just believe they're so gifted that they're going to cost. And because they're going to cost, you can't keep them all. And if you can't keep them all, you're not going to be able to label them a dynasty, because they won't be together to form a dynasty.
By the way, I spent a lot of time at 40-40 over the weekend, and I never saw you there. I don't know how I missed you.
Oh,
we know better than that. We know you're lying about that.
You never know.
Oh my.
No,
okay, back to the question. Dynasty.
40-40 ain't church.
I got to tell you. No. I got to tell you, it's hard to bet against a dynasty right now. Maybe I'm being prisoner of last night's moment, but Stephen A., what if this team manages to get Brandon Browner eligible? And I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know what's going to happen to his suspension, which is right now a lifetime suspension. But what if he successfully appeals it and he's back at cornerback instead of Byron Maxwell? Wow, that's an upgrade. Remember, he was another shutdown physical corner, giant cornerback by cornerback standards. And I look at a Russell Wilson who was talking last night late on primetime. He's saying, I only scratched the surface, a second-year quarterback, and I don't think we have to worry about Russell Wilson hanging out a lot at 40-40 in the offseason. I think it'll be nose to grindstone, and character is as high as it's ever been. He will work even harder this offseason than he did last offseason. Pete Carroll showed me at USC he's great at sustaining momentum. He's a great front runner. He keeps his teams up year after year with new motivational tactics. And they did make it to 3 championship games in 9 years at USC. As you know, they won a couple of them. And it took Vince Young's greatest ever individual performance in a championship game to beat them in the 3rd game that Pete Carroll's team played in at USC. Now, to your point, what I don't love about the dynasty potential is San Francisco, Arizona, St. Louis. They're all getting better and better. Those are 3 very good defenses. Maybe not Seattle good defenses, but they're getting close. So if Seattle has any struggles within the division, if Seattle winds up having to play a championship game, obviously an NFC championship game away, that could upend the dynasty, because not that they're strictly a home crowd product, but they were way better at home, and then they're home away from home that the 12th man made last night at MetLife Stadium. So, big picture, I love that the 5th youngest team ever to make it to a Super Bowl looks like it's poised to do what Dallas did back in the early 90s. They could win 3 out of 4 Super Bowls. It wouldn't shock me at all. But the division that they're in is just so tough and getting tougher that, as you point out, if there are any cap casualties along the way, they might come back just the thinnest of lines back to the pack, and it's going to be tough to come out of that division unscathed year after year. But again, on this day, I love their chances as much as I would love anybody's in this strict salary cap era.
The bowl games are done, but the college football season is far from over. As National Signing Day approaches, a frenzied cross-country competition for defensive studs and quarterbacks is taking place. ESPN Insider's Recruiting Nation lets you know which playmakers and game changers are heading to your favorite college campus, and if maybe one of them can help make next year your year. Behind the scenes, beyond the headlines, before it happens, ESPN Insider, your way in. Visit ESPN.com/insider.
The Seahawks are on the board on the first snap of the game. The ball is hit as it comes down and picked off by the Seahawks. Far sideline, Malcolm Smith, the Legion of Boom, the Seahawks defense. They do it again. Touchdown, Seahawks. Percy Harvin with the catch. He's on the run. He breaks free. He's going to go. They're bringing the trophy home. Your Seahawks, Super Bowl 48 champions.
All right, Super Bowl 48 champions. We welcome in our NFL analyst, Eric Allen. Eric and I are having a little fun during the break because here at ESPN, there's a pick'em board where the analysts will put their face on who would win. You thought Denver would win, and this morning you tried to do what exactly?
I tried to take it off.
You tried to take your face off?
I tried to take it off, but the duct tape was just too tight. Wouldn't let me go that way, you know?
You were on the show yesterday, and you said that the Denver had entirely too many weapons for them not to win this game. Yeah. So how surprised were you by the outcome?
I mean, just from the first series, basically, was just utterly surprised. And props to Danny Cannell. I mean, he called both the Super Bowl and the national championship game. We were here yesterday, had a great time, but again, totally wrong. I'm so surprised that the dominance of this defense from the front seven to the back end, just no weaknesses in this defense, and we saw that from the very first start. Just an ideal situation for Pete Carroll and that defense, just do an outstanding job of continuing to really compete at the highest level at every single position. And you look at the game over and over, you just see how the practice, the preparation really set themselves up for just an outstanding performance on Super Bowl Sunday. They look faster, they look bigger. The Denver Broncos had no chance to really get anything going. And you can see the 2 weeks of preparation really helped by understanding the offensive philosophy, what the Denver Broncos trying to do, the crossing routes, the tempo, what Peyton Manning tried to do early on, the quick passing game, but just the superior tackling of the Seattle Seahawks made me, I started looking at my notes, during the game saying, what kind of defense does this remind me of in the Super Bowl? And I had to go back to the 75 Steelers and the 83 Raiders. Those are the type of units that we're talking about when we talk about this Seattle defense right now that has strengths throughout the football team. There's really no weaknesses to this football team. Pete Carroll and Dan Quinn have done an outstanding job of building this defense with misfits, basically. Yeah. You don't see a lot of number one guys and sort of those kind of star players from the draft. You see a unit that's collectively involved in not only playing, but the chip on the shoulder, the grit, the competition each and every day, going against the number ones from practice. I think this trend is going to continue as far as defense. You already see it in the NFC West. You see the Arizona Cardinals trying to get better, drafting defensively, of course, the San Francisco 49ers, and now you see Jeff Fisher and the St. Louis Rams also drafting defense. So he has really set the tone there.
Well, Eric Allen, to your point, 21 of those players were undrafted on the roster for Seattle, and you said their defense reminds you of the 75 Steelers and the 83 Raiders. Yeah. Stephen A., your take on how surprised you were. I know we're revisiting this, but any additions to what EA just said?
Well, listen, I picked Denver. I was wrong. Let's just call it what it is. But it doesn't negate the fact, even if I had picked Seattle, I never expected this. I didn't expect an annihilation to take place before our very eyes. And I did not expect the Denver Broncos to get so conspicuously punked the way that they did. It was just embarrassing. And Peyton Manning speaking after the game and being insulted by the notion that was embarrassing just lets me know that somebody must have hit him a bit too many times upside his head, because how could you label this performance anything but embarrassing? It was embarrassing to the Broncos as an organization. It was embarrassing to them as players. It was embarrassing to their fan base. It was embarrassing to NFL lovers everywhere. It was embarrassing to viewers. It was a complete waste of our time if we were expecting anything from Denver, because they simply got out-muscled, out-hustled, out-manned, out-coached, and punked. That's just what it comes down to. And I'll tell you something else, Eric. Watching Seattle watching them perform yesterday, you know what stood out in my mind?
What's that?
As I watched them, you usually have guys that say, all right, let's just do our job and let's not hurt ourselves or hurt the offense by putting them in a position to fail or whatever. Seattle resembled a team that almost didn't even care if their offense never showed up out on the field. They were like, we got this. You understand? They, from the opening kickoff when Holiday ran it out and he got smashed at the 14-yard line, to the safety because Manny Ramirez dumped it over Peyton Manning's head because he couldn't hear the signal, and then bouncing in Peyton Manning's face, talking junk to him after the ball, after Noshawn Moreno had pounced on the ball to make sure it was a safety instead of a touchdown, to Demaryius Thomas getting popped silly by Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, you knew who was Mike, going crazy. These boys were on a mission to send a message. They were not just trying to win the game. They were literally trying to demoralize the Denver Broncos. They wanted to make sure that Denver didn't even want to come out of the locker room for the second half. And to be quite honest with you, I think they pulled it off, because I think the only reason we saw the Denver Broncos face is because they were obligated to do so. That's it. Other than that, it was nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I agree. I totally agree with you. And I've been fortunate to play on a defense similar to that in '91. And when we would come to a ballpark, and I'm pretty sure, Skip, you can attest to this, in '91 when the Eagles would come to a ballpark, we didn't care what happened offensively. We were going to take care of business. We were going to take the fight to whatever team, we were going to play. And I remember specifically playing down in Houston against Warren Moon, and we just wanted to brutalize that football team. And that's the kind of feeling I felt last night with the Seattle Seahawks football team. They were in the right spots. They prepared great for this football team, understood what was going to happen, what was going on, and really the tackling and the hard hitting. There was nothing close to being penalized. And that's the one thing we have to really look at when we talk about defense now. We can play defense. We can hit hard and not be penalized. And I thought the Seattle Seahawks did the perfect job of doing that each and every time they had the opportunity to make the big hit.
And Eric, your head coach in 1991, I think it was a guy named Buddy Ryan.
You're right.
Am I right?
That's right.
And he was the architect of the '85 Bears defense that Stephen A. and I just debated before you came on. That single season I thought was slightly better as an overall season plus playoffs than what Seattle pulled off. Stephen A. was making the case that Seattle's Super Bowl performance against a Peyton Manning was the greatest defensive Super Bowl effort ever. It's real close to me. I give the slight edge to the '85 Bears even in the Super Bowl. But you can appreciate what Buddy Ryan brought to the table in Chicago and Philadelphia.
Without a doubt. And he was all about building a unit. And the closeness I think this unit has as far as looking out for each other is similar to how we were in Philadelphia and even how the guys were in Dallas in '92. I mean, you talk about Dion and Ken Norton and the great pass rushers they had, but when you go into that locker room, and I imagine the same way in Seattle, when you go into that locker room, they're like brothers, and they're going to stay tight forever. So that's really something for the rest of the league to really be concerned about. These guys want to play for each other. They're not really concerned about the outside influences. They're all about making sure they man up for themselves, and that's really the key to playing great defense.
Well, Eric, let me ask you this too, man, because I need your help on this.
All right.
I'm going to throw out these names, and I'm going to repeat it for y'all. Peyton Manning. He's Peyton Manning. Mm-hmm. We all know this. Eric Decker, Wes Welker, Demaryius Thomas, Julius Thomas, Noshawn Moreno. How do you have these multitude of weapons and literally no one shows up? And I mean no one. I mean, Eric Decker, I told Skip, we know that Eric Decker played in the game because we saw him being interviewed pregame, and then we saw a quote from him postgame. So clearly it's evidence that he was there. But during the game, for the 60 minutes, nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
Wes Welker, 8 receptions, maybe the most meaningless 8 catches of his career. Demaryius Thomas, 13 catches, 118 yards. With the exception of the touchdown, just meaningless. Julius Thomas, Now, mind you, Seattle did this to Jimmy Graham and then Davis. And I'm sitting there going like this. Well, they're telling me Davis is soft. I don't feel that way, but Skip told me, yeah. And players said, hey, Stephen A., Skip's got a point. Jimmy Graham, well, we know how he got punked. And then it's Julius Thomas. So I'm like, that's 3 tight ends they did it to.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just give the credit to Seattle.
You have
but
to.
I'm looking at these guys, and it's one thing not to catch passes. It's another thing to look scared, to treat everybody in Seattle's secondary like they're the second coming of Jack Tatum. I don't understand it. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me, man.
Well,
I mean, can you explain it?
I'm going to drop a little bit on you here. And I think 2 things here that stand out to me, great defenses and what happened in Sunday's Super Bowl. First of all, if you have an outstanding defense, instead of worrying about all those weapons, you're about the one guy who has to get the ball to all those weapons. And you have to really focus your attack on Peyton Manning. And that's the one thing they had to do consistently is make him move off the spot. Like Buddy would say all the time, we have to attack the quarterback. I don't care about Michael Irvin or Jay Novacek or whoever you're going to bring. We have to attack the quarterback, whether it's Troy Aikman or Joe Montana. Attack the quarterback. Make him start to have happy feet. Make him play under duress and find a way to be able to rattle the cage of the quarterback. And that's the first thing we saw last night, is consistently getting after the quarterback, making the pocket really uncomfortable for Peyton Manning. And then find a way to have your safeties be able to lay the wood on the crossing routes. We saw that from the first and evident. Cam Chancellor did an outstanding job of timing his hits. When they were running those crossing routes, he was going to make them pay. And I think that was evident in whatever they were going to do consistently wise, is being able to hit the receivers, make them catch the ball, and not have any runs after the catch. That was very important and very crucial for this football team to show the punishment, the physicality of this football team. Those 2 safeties are fantastic hitters. They're very intelligent, understanding exactly what offenses are trying to do. So again, you rattle the cage of the quarterback, you make tremendous hits in the middle of the football field. That's your area. You attack and live in that area. They did an outstanding job of doing that all season long, and that's why this football team was able to basically demolish the Denver Broncos last night.
Okay, Eric Allen, let me bring it back to you. To me, big picture, I keep reminding myself, this was the rare February night in the Northeast that was made for Peyton Manning. Game time temperature was almost 50 degrees with light wind, completely against the odds because it's snowing here in New York City right now as we speak. So with no precipitation, no wind chill, I thought that Peyton would come out and at least have some early tempo. So my question, to sum up this whole argument for you, the first offensive snap of the game, as you well know, goes over Peyton's head as he tried to change the play, and Manny Ramirez, Manny being Manny, because he's never being Manny like that, snaps it back into the end zone. I thought that they never quite recovered psychologically from that unforced error. Did you see that in that first quarter? Like they were off from that point forward?
Yeah, they were off. And I thought because of the tempo situation, they were trying to maybe plan their first maybe 5 or 6 plays. And we've seen that before with the 49er teams and some of the other teams. You script a certain amount of plays, and you just kind of have to find a way to put your pedal, put your foot on that pedal and get the tempo going. But the tempo for this football team is the quick game. And the quick game works if you have a team that doesn't tackle very well. So we saw the screens and we saw the quick plays, but the Seattle Seahawks do a better job of tackling. So when you throw that, quick screen, you only get 2 yards. Unlike what we've seen during the season is you throw the quick screen and Thomas goes for 80 yards. We didn't see that because the Seattle Seahawks do an outstanding job of tackling the football. So no tempo, you rattle the quarterback, and you're making big hits, and you're covering down. Basically, when you looked at Peyton Manning, for the first, 3 quarters, he never even looked Sherman's way. So now you're playing with almost half the football field. That's all that you're preparing for. So defensively, it makes it a lot easier when you have that guy who's shutting down that corner on the left side. So you know you can really play your defense towards the backside corner, the middle of the football field. So it really condenses the football field for the Denver Broncos, and it really plays in the hands of that great Seattle Seahawks defense.
Eric Allen, you mentioned rattling the quarterback. Let's talk about Peyton Manning and his legacy. We talked about what a win would do for his legacy, but what about this loss? Has he taken a hit?
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, yes, he has taken a hit. He's still going to be regarded as one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League. He has really pushed our game forward as far as being at the line of scrimmage. We have to give him great respect for that. But when you get into the big game, you have to perform. He's coming off of his 5th MVP, another, number 1 as far as what players think of him. He's done an outstanding job of breaking Tom Brady's record in touchdowns. But when you get to the playoffs and when you get to the Super Bowl and when you want to be that guy, that number 1 guy, that Joe Montana type guy, you have to find a way to win this kind of game. You make all the players around you better, but in the biggest game of the year, you don't show up. So definitely you take a hit. So he's still going to be regarded as one of the better quarterbacks ever, but there's never going to be a debate on who's number 1.
It's not going to be Montana, Brady, Manning. It won't be that.
No, it won't be that. He's in the top 5. When you throw him up, he's in the top 5. And for me, it's Montana. Montana's the guy. He goes to the big games. He gets it done. He has the ability to move outside the pocket. For Peyton Manning, he has to have a secure pocket. Things have to go his way. And when things don't go his way, a lot like Tom Brady, when he plays the Giants, there's difficulty for him being able to be successful. So that's the point, really. These guys have limitations. And the limitations are for teams that can rush you, really do a great job of collapsing the pocket. Sure. They struggle with a situation like that.
Stephen A.
Hey, Eric and Skip, let me say this because it's uncomfortable to say, but it needs to be said. Listen, we all know that Peyton Manning is a future Hall of Famer. He may be the greatest regular season quarterback. We know his football IQ is off the charts and what have you. But sometimes you're so classy, you're so pristine as a human being, you're such royalty in that regard that it hurts. I know my man Sal Palantonio for years. I watched his interview with Peyton Manning afterwards. Sal was so respectful and appropriately so because he was being professional, but your heart goes out to Peyton because how can you root against him because of the class that he continues to exhibit. I totally get that and I understand it. And I'm a fan of Peyton Manning, the person as well as the player, along with his entire family. But if we're being honest with ourselves, in terms of what he's done in the postseason, in terms of what he's done according to a championship resume, his Super Bowl victory over Chicago was an aberration. It's not the norm. He never won a championship at Tennessee, a national championship. He came into the pros being perceived as a great quarterback who underachieved. Correct me if I'm wrong, Skip, because I just got started watching college football over the last 6-7 years. You've been doing it for 20 years as much as you love it. He came into the pros as a great quarterback who was perceived as an underachiever. His first 6 or 7 times up against Tom Brady, he lost. He finally won that AFC Championship game, then won the Super Bowl, like you said, against a quarterback with a QBR of 7 in Rex Grossman. You go up against New Orleans. You throw a pick 6 to Porter to seal the deal, and you lose that Super Bowl. And then yesterday's performance comes about, and you've established yourself, okay, as an individual who's one of the few quarterbacks in NFL history to throw a pick 6 on multiple occasions. That is what has happened to the resume of Peyton Manning. So I'm saying he's great. But if I got to lean anywhere, I'm going to lean towards Chris Carter. He got whipped. They got whipped. You had 2 weeks to prepare. And the first play from scrimmage, that's what happened with you and Manny Ramirez. The team, spearheaded by you, looked completely demoralized and were ultimately punked. There is no way around this. How do you do all of that and point to all of that but circumvent Peyton Manning? It's all jumbled in together, and it was sad to watch. It really was.
It was, but again, cold hard facts, Stephen A., Eric, Peyton Manning's legacy took a huge hit last night. I said last week going into the game, the legacy stakes were 2 or 3 times higher than normal Super Bowls because you had number 1 defense against number 1 offense. I said Peyton could win the equivalent of 2 or 3 Super Bowls in one night. He could also lose the equivalent of 2 or 3 Super Bowls in one night, and it feels like he did. He now falls to 11-12 in the postseason. As Stephen A. points out, he beat one quarterback who was a virtual backup in Rex Grossman, and now Peyton's QBR last night on a scale of 0 to 100, Peyton's 24.4 is the worst since Rex Grossman's 7.1 against Peyton's Indianapolis Colts in the only Super Bowl that Peyton won. So once again, greatest regular season quarterback ever, no discussion, no debate there, has not consistently lived up to the seeds that he's earned in regular seasons for his teams in Indy and now in Denver. So you step back and say, wow, 1 Super Bowl win in 3 tries? Yeah, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like top 5 anymore. So Peyton, to me, falls back a little bit, and he's certainly not in my top 5, and I got Brett Favre in the 5th slot still.
Well, Denver lost on the biggest stage last night, but Las Vegas has high hopes for the Broncos next season. According to the Las Vegas Superbook, Denver is co-favorites with Seattle to win the Pro Football Championship next season. Eric Allen's still here, so here's the question. Do you expect the Broncos to get back to the Super Bowl next season?
Kerry, unfortunately, they're going to have a great chance to get back. I mean, basically, you look at the AFC and what they had to go through to get to the Super Bowl, and, outside of, the Patriots, yep. Really, who's there? I mean, the Chiefs, I love Andy Reid, but the Chiefs are not the kind of football team that's going to get you ready for, a Seattle or a San Francisco. So unfortunately, they're going to probably have the opportunity to get back there. It is just a situation they need to find a way to have more explosiveness downfield. We just saw too many crossing routes. The defensive was old. The coverage in the secondary was not there. Teams are going to continue to really press and poke holes as deficiencies on defense for this football team. So they have a great chance of getting back there unless the Patriots can get healthy, find a way to get some explosiveness, get some receivers and some weapons for Tom Brady. You look at Houston, maybe, if they can be able to bounce back with their new staff and that outstanding defense offensively, they're kind of struggling. So, yeah, Denver Broncos have a really good chance of getting back to the situation and facing another difficult defense, whether it's Seattle or San Francisco, and maybe another beatdown. I was just telling Kerry my ankles are taped tight because I jumped off the bandwagon around the third quarter, so I had a good ankle taping. But, yeah, they have a great chance of getting back to the Super Bowl, guys.
Not too many choices in the AFC besides the Patriots and the Broncos, Stephen A. That's EA's take. What's yours?
Well, listen, they've got a great chance. That shouldn't make any of us happy based on what we saw because I think right now, based on yesterday's performance, I understand they were in the Super Bowl and there's nothing to poo-poo, but at the same time, I'm very sensitive when I watch somebody's heart get snatched. You can lose a game, but when your heart gets snatched, that speaks to me something entirely differently. Because, Eric, you know this. Once we witness something like that, then it emboldens the opposition for future encounters. Not just Seattle, but if I'm an opponent of the Denver Broncos, my attitude is put a hat on them. Get physical with them. You can make them wilt beneath the pressure. All right? Everything that I do is to apply pressure to Peyton Manning, to put something on him, to get in his face. Okay? When I look at Julius Thomas and he looks scared, and I look at Demaryius Thomas and he looks rattled, and I look at Eric Decker and Wes Welker and they look completely non-existent, I'm not thinking about skill. They've got speed. They know how to run routes. They can catch. I'm thinking you got your heart snatched. So my response to that would be to get a couple of Rough Riders to add to this defense. Champ Bailey says he's going to come back next season. All right, that's fine. But at the same time, whether it's him, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, or Trevathan, the list goes on and on. You need some of these cats. They didn't have Von Miller out there. That didn't help. But they need some Rough Riders. They need some cats up in there that don't mind getting in your face and enjoy that kind of encounter to match the intensity of a Seattle. That's why San Francisco was so tough, because their defense showed up and said, what you're doing to our offense, we will do to you. And for the most part, they had done that in the NFC Championship game before the whistle blew and delayed, and ultimately Russell Wilson threw that touchdown while people were distracted and stuff for a second or two. But San Francisco matched Seattle's intensity, and that's what you have to do in order to ward off an opposition like that. And when you've gotten punked, and the world saw you get punked, the opposition saw it too, and now they're saying, oh, that's how you stop these dudes. And that's what I think is going to happen in the future unless Denver gets some Rough Riders.
It's going to be
Stephen
difficult.
A., you don't think they'll make it back?
No, I'm saying, unfortunately, they'd have a shot because they're gifted enough. It's just that the result will be the same. They're not going to win with what they exposed yesterday. They're not going to do it. They might get back because the AFC isn't that strong, but they're going to win.
Okay, number one, I think last night cinches the fact that Peyton Manning will return with a vengeance next year if his doctors sign off on his offseason tests that he goes through. And I'm with both of you guys, especially with Eric. I don't see how you can keep Denver from piling up regular season wins and again getting to ride the number one seed through the AFC playoffs with 2 home games potentially. So I'm looking at the AFC West versus the NFC West that Seattle has to fight through. Tough defense after defense after defense. I don't know that the AFC West will be any stronger than it was last season. So you brought up Von Miller. I'm going to assume, Stephen A., he will be back. He was sorely missed last night because I remind you, during the regular season, Russell Wilson was pressured the highest percentage of any quarterback in pro football. 32% of his dropbacks, he got pressured during the regular season. Number 1 in the NFL. Last night, 19% was all he was pressured on his dropbacks. And I also remind you, for the first time in Super Bowl history, a team pulled off 0 turnovers and 0 sacks in a Super Bowl game. Where was Von Miller when you really needed him? And I also throw this one out, and I don't know it for a fact, but I'm going to assume that Ryan Clady would be back to protect Peyton's blind side at the left tackle. I'm talking about, formerly an all-pro player in Ryan Clady. They might lose Eric Decker, no big deal, especially off last night. So, again, I think Denver is perfectly positioned to come back with a vengeance as a football team to right the wrong of the humiliation they just suffered on the national stage.
I agree. I think, but it's going to be very difficult to go through a season, and if you reach all those great highs offensively or defensively during the regular season, and everyone just says, okay, but what are you going to do when you get to the Super Bowl? So again, all the great stats that they have the ability and the opportunity to put up next year won't mean anything. We won't care about it. We won't care about, 70 touchdowns a year and 1,000 yards. And we won't care about any of that. It'll all be about what are you going to do when you get back to the Super Bowl. That's a very difficult task to handle for 16 to 18 weeks. It doesn't matter what you do during the regular season. You're going to get to home field. You did that last year. You're going to, beat Tom Brady. You did that last year. What are you going to do in the Super Bowl? So that's very difficult, guys, to have that on your back going through a National Football League season.
In leading the Seahawks to their first Super Bowl title, Russell Wilson set the record for the most wins by a quarterback in his first 2 seasons in the Super Bowl era. After what you saw this season, would you take Wilson over the other young quarterbacks in the NFL? Stephen A., that question's for you.
My answer would be no. And I like Russell Wilson. And I've been very impressed with him. I'm a fan of his. And considering the amount of winning that he has done, I definitely think he deserves our respect. But let's face reality. Seattle is Seattle because of their defense and their home crowd and what they've been able to do on their home turf for the vast majority of the last couple of years. I think it's about their defense, and I think it's about that proverbial 12th man. Not to diminish Russell Wilson because he doesn't make mistakes. He's very composed and very, very intelligent and handles himself very, very well on the field. There's no doubt about that. I like him a great deal. But I'm still not picking him ahead of Andrew Luck. And I'm still not picking him ahead of Cam Newton. Those two dudes, with their talent, I would pick before Russell Wilson because I just think they have it. Russell Wilson is a guy that's not messing it up. And even though he makes plays, I don't consider him a game changer. I consider a Cam Newton, I consider an Andrew Luck a game changer. That's why I would pick that way.
Stephen A., I'm not only with you, but I'm going to throw another name onto the fire ahead of Russell Wilson. I'm sorry, I'm not giving up on Robert Griffin III. I saw with my own two eyes what he did as a rookie in this league when he had the best QBR of any of those young quarterbacks. Obviously, 20 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, led his team out of nowhere to the NFC East crown. If he gets healthy and happy, I'm not giving up on him. And if we're talking about in a vacuum here, which quarterbacks would you take? I'd still take him, along with Cam, along with Luck, along with Kaepernick, over Russell Wilson. I'm with you. No offense to Russell Wilson. I'm just answering the question as it's asked. But I remind you, if you look back at the last 5 games we just saw Russell Wilson play, that would be the 2 at the end of the regular season, the 3 in the playoffs, he averaged 161 yards passing, only 161, completing only 59% of his passes. Clearly, in each of the playoff games, he made 1 or 2 huge throws that either iced the game or tilted the game in Seattle's favor. I take nothing away from that. But he does get to lean on the best defense in football. And at home, he did get to lean on the best home crowd in football. So I'm sorry if we took Russell Wilson and just put him in a vacuum up against the 4 other quarterbacks, young quarterbacks I just named. I'm sorry he would rank 5th on that list. I'm with you.
Nothing more to be said.
In his 4th season with the Seahawks, Pete Carroll won his first Super Bowl. He becomes only the 3rd coach to win both a Super Bowl and an AP national championship. What does the Super Bowl victory mean for Pete Carroll's legacy? Stephen A., I'll start with you first.
Well, it validates and solidifies him as one of the great coaches in the game today, but more importantly, the players themselves and how they speak of him, combined with the accumulation of talent that he's been able to register for the Seattle Seahawks. I definitely put him in an elite status, not just because of the rings, but because of how they're doing it and the fact that guys who appear to be a bit of renegades to some degree, in a healthy way, they just seem, they swear by this guy. If you are a football player who loves the game of football, the message has been sent that Pete Carroll is the coach that you want to play for. And when you've won on the collegiate level and competed in 2 national title games, and then you come to the pros and you build something that emerges into being a number 1 defense, being elite, and ultimately a Super Bowl champion after being in the playoffs last year and losing to the Falcons, I just don't think you can say enough about the job that he's done and the message that he has sent. Seattle is the place to be because Pete Carroll is there.
I hear you, Stephen A., but I remind you, we have often criticized Pete Carroll on this show because under his reign there in Seattle since 2010, they've had more PED suspensions than any other National Football League team. But now you step back and say, well, to your point, you validated the way that you're coaching the group, that they all came together. They seem to love him. We saw the ESPN, the magazine vote of players around the league last week. He is the coach that most players would want to play for today. And now he's canceled those early flameouts at other NFL stops early in his career because he did create a dynasty at USC. And now it looks like he's on the verge of a dynasty in Seattle. So that was huge for him last night.
I agree.
All right, guys, it's time for our final take, our rapid-fire Q&A. So let's start with the trio. Tim Tebow starred in 2 Super Bowl commercials. And take a look at him.
Everyone thinks I want a contract.
Here's the question, and Skip, I'll start with you. Did you like, love, or hate his commercials?
Stephen A. Smith, I hated both of these commercials for Tim Tebow if, in fact, he still wants to play in the National Football League. Both of them came across as very Hollywood leading man type commercials, and I know he was trying to poke fun at himself for I don't have a contract right now, but all these commercials will do for a GM who might have had an inkling that maybe I'll bring Tim Tebow to camp this year. It will remind that GM of what a huge media crazed distraction Tim Tebow will still create in anybody's training camp. I think it just might do him in as far as his potential, what's left of his NFL future.
The only thing that will do Tim Tebow in is his inability to throw the football. I thought the commercials were fantastic. I thought he showed a lot of personality. I was very impressed. A matter of fact, I was more impressed with his ability to act and perform in these commercials than I was in all the time I've watched him on the football field. The guy was great, man. I really enjoyed his commercials, especially when he was looking at me and you. I got eyes on you. I mean, it was funny. I think I liked it. I just thought it was entertaining. And I don't think, they look, Skip, they know he's a big boy. He's trying to earn an honest living. He's working for this network. He's making commercials, making money that way.
No.
We're living in a capitalistic society. Don't hate on the brother. It's just that he has to be able to throw.
I'm hating on the brother.
Anything.
He's my brother.
I'm just saying.
I want to see him. I want to see him succeed, and you want to see him fail. So let him become a Hollywood actor.
I do not.
If that's
Don't
what
lie
he
like
wants
that.
to do.
That's not true.
But don't come back to me about any NFL future.
But don't lie. Don't lie. I don't feel like I don't want him to fail. I just don't believe he will succeed.
Yeah, you do.
Because I don't believe he can throw. I wish he could throw. I don't want him to fail. Don't say that.
I'm
not cruel like that.
Well, he threw better than Peyton Manning did last night. I can say that much.
All right, gentlemen.
Actually, we don't know that to be true.
What grade would you give the Super Bowl commercials overall, Skip Bayless?
I would give them, Carrie, a C. Nothing knocked me out of my chair, especially the Tim Tebow commercials. I actually liked the very first one I saw, the Rob Riggle Ford commercial, which turned into the James Franco Ford commercial. And I guess I liked the puppy dog Clydesdale commercial. I guess it was heart-rending. I don't know. Overall, not much.
I was very, very underwhelmed. Not that impressed, particularly when you see some of the Super Bowl ads from the past. I just thought that they came up short. It was devoid of a lot of humor. They tried to tug at the heart a lot of times, and they were successful in doing so. But the fun, the humor, the memorable commercials you're talking about the next day or whatever, I didn't see too much of that. And considering the money that they pay for it, I expected a lot better than what we got. I'm going to go with what Greeny said earlier this morning. I was completely underwhelmed with the commercials.
All right, Stephen, I got to give this one to you, actually. We talked about this. It wasn't Beyonce, but it was Bruno Mars. How did you feel about the halftime performance?
I got to tell you, I've never been one. I've listened to a couple of the songs. I like it or whatever. Bruno Mars has a fan in me because he tore the house down, figuratively speaking, last night. He was sensational. I loved it. He was so good. I have to go back and watch Beyonce again just to make sure that he wasn't better than her. Because I have to admit to you, I started scratching my head and saying, was he better than her? Bruno Mars, he's got a new fan in me. He was sensational. Sensational.
He was not better than Beyonce. He was not better than Prince. But I will give you this, that I'm no fan of Bruno Mars. But while I was tweeting at halftime and reading the box score, all of a sudden next to me, Ernestine starts going crazy. And she says, this guy is sensational. She's going to go out and get his stuff today, order his CD, I don't know what she's doing. She's a Bruno Mars nut now.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can catch First Take Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on ESPN2.